Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day one of the South American Palm Weevil San Diego County Symposium. My name is Cheryl Reynolds. I'm with the UC statewide IPM program. Peter Cosina from UC IPM is also here, and he's going to be helping with technical problems. Okay, so now I would like to introduce Apurba Barman. He's the area low desert IPM advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension in Imperial County. Today, he's going to be moderating our webinar, and he's going to give a few opening remarks. So I will
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this very important webinar on South American Palm Weevil. I'm Apurba Barman, an area IPM advisor here in Low Desert, based in Imperial County. Again, today's webinar is going to be about South American Palm Weevil, and we have a great lineup of speakers. And as you know, South American Palm Weevil is a new invasive pest, which is well established in San Diego County. And it has been a great concern for homeowners as well as landscape professionals. So in today's webinar, you'll be able to learn its biology, some of the management tactics available. This project was actually, this is a part of a project which was funded by Western IPM Center. Western IPM Center, one of the 4 regional IPM center funded by USDA, NIFA. Sonia Rios, Mark Huddle, and Glenn Wright, Michael Rathwitz, Peter Cosina, all were in this team. And part of this research would be presented today. So on behalf of this great team, I welcome you all to this webinar. So with that, I would like to pass it to our first speaker, Dr. Mark Huddle. He is the biological control specialist based in UC Riverside. He is also the director for the Center for Invasive Species Research. With that, I'll pass it over to Mark.
Okay, yes, so we're going to be providing some updates on the South American palm weevil invasion into Southern California. And basically, we're going to be focusing on what's been happening in San Diego County, as this is the only county in California that's currently infested, well, at least that we know of, with South American palm weevil. Get rid of that. There we go. So these are some of the topics we'll go over this morning. We'll go over weevil damage to palms, and we'll cover some basic aspects of weevil biology. We'll discuss the spread into and throughout San Diego County as best as we know it up to the current situation that we'll be reporting on today. And then I'm going to provide you some updates on the Sweetwater Reserve. This is a riparian area in Bonita, which is close to Chula Vista. It's heavily infested with South American palm weevil because there are a lot of wilding Canary Islands date palms that have flourished in this riparian area. We've been running some trapping programs in there for the last 6 years. Every 3 to 4 months, we fly a drone over the Sweetwater Reserve to monitor palm mortality. And my wife, who's Christina, she's a co-author on this presentation. Every 6 months, we do a multi-day drive around the reserve to survey palm mortality in people's gardens and around shopping centers and other recreational areas. We'll go briefly over some management options, pesticide applications, trapping, and biocontrol. I see Ricardo Aguilar is on board today, and I think he's been really up to speed on a lot of the treatments that have been going on. Something we've just discovered, and if you've been trapping weevils, you've probably seen these phoretic mites attached to the outside of the bodies of these weevils. We've just finished identifying these mites, and we've written up a publication on this. And it looks like that when the weevil came into California, it's introduced at least 2 new species of mites that hitchhike on this weevil that previously weren't established in California. So it looks like the invasion of this weevil is contributing to multiple invasions by assisting the introduction of other non-native organisms. And a big one that we're worried about, which currently isn't here, is the red ring nematode, which causes red ring disease in palms. And we'll finish up with our website, and present to you a quick read or a QR code that you can scan with your phones or you can take a photo of. So you can report infestations on our webpage that we're maintaining on South American Palm Weevil. These reports have been really helpful in understanding the spread of the weevil, the intensity of the attacks in certain areas, and just as importantly, we're now receiving through this website a lot of reports of different palm species that are being attacked and killed by the weevil. And folks have been uploading photographs of these damaged palms, the weevils and the adult weevils and larvae that they've been pulling out of these palms. So those data are really helpful for us to understand what's going on in the environment, because we don't have crews on the ground tracking the spread of this weevil. So we're relying on community scientists to help us with basically mapping the spread of this weevil throughout Southern California. So this whole story started way back in Tijuana, sometime around 2004-ish, 2010-ish, something around in that general area, 2010, when there were reports of Canary Island date palms that were being killed. So we went down and had a look, and we dug out of the crowns these rather large black weevils, which were subsequently identified as South American palm weevil. And the damage that we saw was quite significant. You can see here that the basal sheaths that sit at the bottoms of the fronds were heavily tunneled. You can see that the larval weevils, when they're finished feeding within the apical meristem or the crown of the palm, they then migrate into these basal areas of the fronds where they dig out these pupation channels to pupate. And in heavily infested palms, the crown eventually dies, and then the top falls off it, and then the palm will ultimately go into decline because the growing area, the apical meristem or the palm heart, which sits at the top of the trunk and is responsible for sprouting out all these new fronds, is effectively being killed, and that results in the death of the palm tree. I'll see if I can get my laser pointer to work. There we go. That's probably easier for you to see. So this palm has lost its crown, and it will die. So if you look inside the palm, you'll see that the big fat weevil grubs are feeding in the apical meristem, which is at the central top part of the trunk, and it gets really chewed up. It gets very warm. It has a very distinctive odor, probably because there's fermentation going on. We don't really understand much about this process, but the microbes in the fermentation process may actually help these grubs feed on these woody chunks that they're churning out just through chewing up the palm fibers with their mandibles. They will excavate a short distance into the top of the palm tree, maybe 12 to 18 inches at the absolute most. So they may carve out a bit of a basin into the more woody, harder part of the palm trunk, but they will not drill their way down through the palm trunk all the way to the roots. What they're feeding on is that palm heart, that soft, delicious, juicy bowl of goodness that sits at the very top of the palm trunk, and that's responsible for sending up the new palm fronds. So once that area has been cleaned out through weevil feeding, the palm tree will die. However, as I'll show you subsequently in some slides further into this talk, if a small part of that palm heart is left undamaged, the palm tree can revive itself and come back to life. So removing these dead and dying palm trees, it's an expensive business. It's technically complicated. It's best to get a professional arborist crew in to do this, to take down the fronds, remove the trunk of the tree. And in this instance, we had it lifted up onto a flatbed truck where it was heavily tarped and then taken away to a landfill to be disposed of. If possible, when disposing of some of these materials, if it can be chipped on site, that would be really great, because any weevil pupae and larvae that could be in the bases of these fronds getting ready to pupate, they'll just be chewed up and spat out through the chipper machine. We are also recommending that if this material goes off to a landfill, it needs to be heavily tarped to stop any material escaping on the drive to the landfill. And it preferably needs to be taken to an area where they have a 24-hour burial policy. This is to ensure that material's not sitting around for days or weeks while the weevils can continue their development and then just emerge from this infested plant material and start new infestations in other areas. So these dropping hazards are really quite significant for these dead and dying palms. These photographs are from Imperial Beach in San Diego County. You can see that there was a line of majestic Canary Island date palms planted here, heavily attacked by South American palm weevil. very slow response to managing these palms. And as a consequence, when the wind would come in off the beach, it can be quite strong at times. The palm fronds would get knocked off the trees. They would drop onto the ground, damaging the fences, landing on cars. And as many of you know, the bases of these fronds have very pronounced spines on them, which are a significant hazard to kids or pets running around. And I've had some of, at least once, these thorns go right through the bottom of my boot into my foot, and they're quite painful. So wind, rain, storm activity, which is common near the coast, can really accelerate the dropping of these large palm fronds onto these driveways, fences, and cars that are parked in the streets. So a little bit about the life cycle of these weevils. It's really quite simple. These weevils belong to a group of weevils that have these long snouts. The other group of weevils have short snouts, like Diaprepes root weevil or the Fuller's rose weevil. But these weevils that we're dealing with have these long noses, and the females use them to drill a hole into the palm tree somewhere in the crown where it's going to be close to that meristematic area that the larvae want to feed on. She then turns around, backs her tip of her abdomen up to that hole, exerts her ovipositor, and then lays these large eggs that you see here on this penny into the hole that she has drilled with her rostrum, her snout, or her proboscis. They're all the same words for the same thing. And then she'll cover that over with some mucousy material to plug that hole that may prevent desiccation or natural enemies or fungi getting into the hole to kill the eggs. Then after a week or so, maybe longer, depending on the temperature, those eggs will hatch into these grubs. And it is these feeding larvae in the apical meristem, the palm heart, that ends up killing the palm tree. You can have hundreds of these larvae feeding in the apical meristematic area, the top of the palm trunk, because it's, especially with Canary Island date palms, it's such a big area. There's such a big bowl of food up there to support these weevils that the numbers that can get in there and start breeding can be quite significant. And this may be one reason why Canary Island date palms is such a highly preferred host for the palm weevil, because it has a very wide trunk, and the width of that trunk is representative of the amount of food that's sitting at the top of that trunk. So when you compare it to, say, a Washingtonia robusta, which has a very narrow trunk, there's not a lot of palm heart up there for the weevils to feed on. But you compare it to one of those Canary Island date palms where the girth of the trunk is really quite significant. That's an indicator that there's a lot of food sitting at the top of those palm trees for the weevils to feed on. So once those grubs have finished feeding and their development in the larval stage is complete, they will then often move out to the bases of those palm fronds, drill those pupation chambers, and when they're sitting in there, they'll start grabbing the palm fibers that are around them, and then they spin their bodies around and wrap those palm fronds, palm fibers very tightly around their bodies, developing these very, very tight cocoons. And they can be quite hard to crack open with your fingers. And they're about the size of a small cigar. You know, you might have smoked it down, you're getting ready to toss it away. And that's about the size that you're looking at with those pupal cocoons. So if you crack one of them open when they've just been finished being spun up, you'll see in it this larval stage. This is the pre-pupal larva. It's just finished spinning up its cocoon. It's now in that fibrous cocoon. It'll molt or shed its skin one more time and go into the pupal stage. And then it has these wing buds that have developed on the side of the body. And you can see that it's now looking a bit more beetle-like rather than grub-like. That pupa, which is still within that protective cocoon, will molt or shed its skin one more time, and then it will come out in the adult form with its legs and wings fully developed, the long proboscis already developed. And the males and females are about equal numbers in the population, and they can be very easy to sex. So if you catch one, you should be able to identify whether or not you have a male or female simply by looking at the top of the snout or the rostrum or the proboscis. The males have these thick setae or hairs that sit on the top of the rostrum. The females lack these setae. So the top of the female nose is very smooth, whereas the males have these stout bristles packed together on top of the nose. And this is how you identify male and female weevils. So it's a pretty straightforward process. So one of the things we've been really worried about with the South American palm weevil coming into California is not only is the larval feeding killing the palm trees, but in areas where this weevil is native, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and parts of South America, it vectors a pathogenic nematode which kills palm trees. And this nematode is called the red ring nematode because infested palms, for reasons I don't understand, I haven't really seen a good description of this. If anybody can point me towards it, I'd be very interested in reading about it. Forms these red rings within the palm tree. This is not a consistent diagnostic, but it's one that's characteristic of red ring nematode infestation, and this is where it gets its common name from. So the adult weevils are infected with these nematodes. They can carry them on the outside of their bodies. They can put them into palm trees when they land on them, either through defecating or laying eggs in the palms. So these nematode infections, they can kill the palms. Some estimates suggest that around 35 to 80% of palms can be killed by red ring nematode disease, red ring disease in coconut or palm plantations in Central America. It's considered to be a very serious pest of tropical palms. And palms can die in as little as 6 to 20 weeks after they've been infected with the nematodes. So even if you were able to kill off the weevil infestation in your palm tree through a combination of contact and systemic insecticide use, if the nematode has been put into the palm tree by the South American palm weevil, it appears to be a death sentence for the palm. So even if you could clean out the weevil infestation, if it's been inoculated with nematodes, the palm is still going to die. Thankfully for us in California, we have not yet detected red ring nematode or red ring disease. However, our experience with previous disease vectors, such as Asian citrus psyllid, for example, strongly suggests that what we will see is that we see the arrival of the vector, and then several years later, we see the disease show up. And this is what we saw with Huang Long Bing. We got Asian citrus psyllid, then there were several years that went by of no detection of the disease Huang Long Bing. And then finally, we started detecting citrus trees with Candidatus Liberibacter asiaticus, or C-class, which is the causal organism of Huang Long Bing and citrus. So this is an interesting table. This was generated from Google research, and these are the types of palm species that have been reported as being attacked by South American palm weevil in its native range. We know that coconuts are a really good host. For us here in California, we're very worried about date palms being attacked because we have a large edible date industry out in the Coachella Valley and in part the Bard Valley of Arizona as well. We know that it attacks fan palms. The first record of this pest in the Baja Peninsula, at the very tip of the Baja Peninsula down there, Cabo San Lucas, were mortality of Washingtonia robusta palms, Mexican fan palms. Now, this is an incomplete list, and some of these species are not present, as far as I'm aware, in California, or if they are, they're not very common. However, as I'm going to show you in some later slides that are coming up, we have been getting new records of palm hosts that are being killed by South American palm weevil here in California. Right now, we have a huge, massive natural field experiment going on. Southern California and San Diego has a diversity of palm species that have been collected from around the world and planted, say, at Balboa Park, San Diego Zoo, people's backyards. And these palms are providing new opportunities for South American palm weevil to attack. And some of these palm species it has never seen before because it didn't evolve with them. So, for example, we have some records of South American palm weevil killing palms that are native to Africa. And obviously, South American palm weevil is not native to Africa. So let's go into this list now. So some of the new palm species that we've recorded as being killed include these Guadalupe palms, Brahea edulis. Adults and larvae were collected from these palms at Balboa Park. Here we have these Senegal palms, Phoenix reclinata, that have been killed off by South American palm weevil, again at Balboa Park. We've had several reports now of these Chilean wine palms, these Jubea species being attacked. And what I think is interesting about this species of palm is that it has a very fat trunk in comparison to some of these Phoenix species like reclinata, which have very thin trunks. So I think this is an indicator that the fatter the trunk of these palms, the more apical meristem and juicy palm heart is going to be sitting at the top of that trunk, the more attractive it is likely to be to South American palm weevil. At least that's what I think, based on its high preference for Canary Island date palms in Southern California. Here's another shot of the Chilean wine palm that's been taken out at Balboa Park, and here's the weevils that were pulled out of it. Ricardo provides some really nice photos of a Chilean wine palm that has been taken out, and you can see that the holes here at the bases of the fronds They pulled out some pupal cocoons and adult weevil, and you can see how it's excavated out the apical meristem at the top of the trunk. I really like this photo, Ricardo. It's a great one. It shows the damage, how the apical meristem's been hollowed out, but the weevil hasn't drilled its way down into the woody parts of the trunk. It's just feeding in that bowl of juicy goodness at the very top of the palm trunk. So we've had some other additional reports coming out of Balboa Park. Sable bermudiana has been attacked. This palm was identified by Don Hodell. And there are also reports that we've received on our website of a related species that is referred to as sable riverside. I'm not sure if that's a common name for a variety of a sable palm or whether it's the true scientific name. You know, riverside is the species name. It seems a little odd. But you Google this and you just get a lot of information about palm producers selling sable riverside. And I haven't really figured out what the situation is with the scientific name on that. If somebody can enlighten me on that, I'd be really appreciative of some help on that. This is an interesting one. Prochardia munroy. This palm is from Molokai in Hawaii, heavily attacked by South American palm weevil. Kathy Munro provided these great photographs. You can see the tunneling here is gone to the fat base of the trunk. And Kathy was very proactive in her management of this pest. She gouged out the weevil larvae, treated this with insecticides and fungicides, I think, and then packed these chambers full of silicone I guess, sealant that you'd buy for your windows at like Home Depot or Lowe's. And there's the dead weevil on the ground. You know, she skewered it with a metal spike to the ground. That thing won't be going anywhere now. So she found 5 dead weevils, live larvae, 4 cocoons that she extracted with dead larvae. The feeding tunnels were flushed with a high-strength imidacloprid solution. She then treated the tunnels with hydrogen peroxide. And yeah, it looks like she, used fire to cauterize those wounds as well to stop them oozing out and then pack them full of silicone. So yeah, very, very interesting control program. And I haven't heard from Kathy. I'm assuming that the plant is still alive and doing well. Here's another one, Parajubea toralii, that has been attacked. This report came in very recently from the San Diego Zoo. Palm heavily hit, cocoons pulled out with weevil larvae in them. Now we're getting multiple reports now of Bismarckia nobilis being attacked. This photograph was sent to us by Pedro Berry out of La Jolla. You can see the collapsed crown here, and you can see the tunnels that the weevil larvae have drilled into the base of the fronds of this Bismarckia. We've followed up on this report that came into our website that weevil activity was responsible for this crown dropping off this fan palm. We've contacted the folks that sent in this report to see if they had any documentation of weevil larvae and pupae or adults being associated with this dropped crown. But if this is happening, this is really quite an alarming impact of weevil feeding on these palms, because that crown, I don't know how much that must weigh, a couple of 100 pounds maybe. It landed on a person or landed on the roof of that car, it would have done significant amounts of damage. So this is one of the really valuable things about the website, is that we are able to accumulate a lot of these data that people can send to us. So we're really relying on community scientists who are dealing with these palm weevils and seeing these palm species that are being attacked and the damage that they're causing, to report it and to upload photographs onto our website so we can see what's going on. And that also provides a really useful resource for us to share with you guys at meetings like this, so you have a better idea of what's happening out there. So a question I get asked a lot is, well, these weevils are big, can they fly? And yeah, they can fly. Actually, they're quite strong flyers. And we set them up on these things that we called flight mills in the lab, actually in the quarantine facility. And each time they go around in a circle, that's about 3 feet or 1 meter of distance. And these flight mills are hooked up to a laptop computer, and we record the distances that males and females can fly over a 24-hour period. And then we can correlate that with the sex of the weevil, the age of the weevil, the size of the weevil. So then we get a good idea of what the flying capabilities of these weevils are. So some of the data that we collected from the flight mill studies, it was really very interesting. The average flying distances for male and female weevils appears to be about 25 miles or approximately 40 kilometers in 24 hours. We don't know if they fly those distances in nature. At least in San Diego, the spread of the weevil has been relatively slow. And we don't know whether it's because there's just so many palm trees around for the weevils to attack that there's just little to no motivation for them to fly long distances, or whether they're really lazy and they don't want to fly if they don't have to. But when they're on the flight mills in the lab, they've got no choice. They have to fly. And the reason they fly is they can't put their feet on the ground. And as soon as you take your feet off the ground, if you're an insect, and if you have wings, your first response is to start flying. And that's what they do. As soon as you hook them up to the flight mill, their feet come off the ground, they take off almost immediately. And we've had these weevils, they can fly nonstop for about 4 to 5 hours. They'll lose around 20% of their body weight as they fly over that 24-hour period. And our record breaker, we had one female that flew 93 miles in a 24-hour period. Absolutely amazing. Our longest flying male was about 62 miles in a 24-hour period. But you can see most of them cluster around the 30 to 40 kilometer mark, or around 25 miles in a 24-hour period. So very strong flyers. Whether or not they do that in nature, we simply don't know. Perhaps one way that they're really likely to move long distances very rapidly is through the unintentional movement of infested palm trees that are coming out of San Diego County. There are no quarantines on the movement of palm trees out of San Diego County, so it's possible that somebody could buy a palm tree that's infested and then move it all the way into LA or up to San Luis Obispo or somewhere further, and that would enable the palm weevil to suddenly jump several hundred miles away from the furthest northernmost record in San Diego County. Okay, so let's go back in time and look what's happened in Mexico and how South American palm weevil ended up in Tijuana. South American palm weevil was first reported from the Baja Peninsula down here in a natural areas preserve called Todos Los Santos, which is very close to Cabo San Lucas at the very tip of the Baja Peninsula. That record was from 2000. November 2000, entomologists noticed the Washingtonia robusta dying in this reserve. 10 years later, around 2010, we saw the first confirmed infestations of South American palm weevil up here in Tijuana. So that distance is about 932 miles or so, about 1,500 kilometers. So if you break that down, that the weevil was just like slowly flying its way up the peninsula, it was covering around 93 miles or so per year, assuming that humans didn't move it, from way down here near Cabo all the way up to Tijuana. And if you break that down even further to how many miles was it spreading per month, it's around 8 miles per month. Our flight mill study strongly suggests that these weevils would have no trouble flying those short distances if they were looking for palm trees that were spread, maybe not very evenly throughout the peninsula as they're hopscotching from town or village to village as they move their way northwards up towards San Diego County. So could South American palm weevil have simply flown up the Baja Peninsula on its own, colonizing palm trees as it traveled northwards? I think absolutely. The distances that need to be covered and over this time period are well within the flight capabilities of this weevil. So what are we seeing in San Diego County? Well, this map shows where we're going to be reporting on next. This is the Sweetwater Reserve study that we're doing down in Bonita near Chula Vista. The furthest most northern record that I have is still in the San Marcos region. That was from about 2019. If anybody has any records, confirmed records of this weevil further north than San Marcos, I'd be very interested in hearing about those, please. So just say from the Sweetwater Reserve, which is heavily infested, and we'll be going over this a little bit further, it's about 35 miles up to San Marcos, or approximately 50 miles from Tijuana, where the weevil was first discovered in 2010. Just some very simple calculations suggest that the weevil may be moving northwards at about a rate of about 6 miles per year, and it's almost certainly just dispersing naturally as it's just moving from palm to palm. Again, very slow rate of movement, which is surprising given the lab work that suggests that these palm weevils are extremely strong flyers. Okay, so Let's start putting some pieces together here and focus more on what's going on in the San Diego area. So back in 2016, I did a survey in Tijuana, tons and hundreds of dead Canary Island date palms all around the Tijuana area. We started getting reports in the southern parts of San Diego County. I think the first confirmed establishment was probably in San Isidro, approximately in 2014. And then from there, the weevil moved northwards, and we found the heavy infestations in the Sweetwater Reserve area in Bonita. And we have set up our trapping studies there. We have 10 bucket traps, and every month I go out and count the weevils that have been caught in those bucket traps, and I'll share those data with you in a few minutes. And then Christina and I, in the north, south, west, and east direction around this heavily infested Sweetwater Reserve, we've done a driving survey where we have tagged 519 Canary Island date palms, and every 6 months we drive this route and then just record whether those tagged palms are still alive or dead. And also at the Sweetwater Reserve, we fly the drone every 3 to 4 months and count the numbers of palm trees that have died. Okay, so this is what we're doing. We're trapping here in the Sweetwater Reserve. We have our 10 bucket traps that I check every month, and we have our 519 palm trees spread in the north, south, west, and east direction around the reserve. And basically, we're interested in seeing what the levels of mortality are in people's gardens, parks, recreational areas in relationship to a heavily infested area here in the Sweetwater Reserve. This is a Google shot of the Sweetwater Reserve where we have our traps. You can see it's a riparian area. The water that feeds into here comes from the Sweetwater Reservoir, which is up here, several miles to the north. And you can see how heavily urbanized it is around the reserve. So given the fact that there's hundreds of naturalized Canary Island date palms in this reserve, there's no reason to think that the weevils would just sit here and not move anywhere. They're probably breeding up and just flying out into these public urban areas, such as the Glen Abbey Cemetery here, which has had significantly high levels of palm mortality due to South American palm weevil. And once it establishes in these urban areas, it feeds and then just continues spreading. And that's what the driving survey is trying to capture. So here's a more detailed Google Earth shot. You can see the Canary Island date palms standing over the willow understory. These willows are deciduous. They'll be dropping their leaves soon. And here you can see one South American palm weevil killed Canary Island date palms. These things remind me of sea anemones. And when they die like this, they look like large brown umbrellas or big dead mushrooms when you look at them from the top. So in the reserve, we have 10 bucket traps. I check these every month. We bait them with dates. And the fermenting bait is dates that we've mixed with some water and basically a packet of baker's yeast. This really gets the fermentation process going. We did some studies looking at different yeast species and that you can use for making beer and wine. But the baker's yeast seems to release these volatiles that the weevil finds much more attractive than beer or wine-making yeasts that are commercially available. So the bucket traps are hung in the palm trees. They have this burlap fabric wrapped around the outside. The weevils fly to the bucket because they're attracted to the fermenting bait and the aggregation pheromone that we hang from the lid of the bucket. The aggregation pheromone is commercially available, and you can buy it from Iskatech here in Riverside. We use their product for baiting our traps with bucket traps that we put out at the Sweetwater Reserve. So the weevils are attracted to the aggregation pheromone and the combined smell with the fermenting bait. We use dates, water, and baker's yeast. They land on the side of the bucket. They walk up the burlap fabric and then drop into these 4 centimeter diameter hole, 2-inch diameter holes that we've drilled into the side of the buckets. And then in the bucket, we have some antifreeze, and the weevils drop in there, get trapped, and they drown. So here are the data. We've been trapping since July 2016. I just went out and cleared the traps for September, for August, and I'll be going back beginning of October. That'll be the September trapping data. But there's a couple of things I want you to take home from this graph. The first is we catch weevils all year round. However, weevil activity, at least flight activity into the trap, seems to be lower over winter. Then it escalates, peaks in early to mid-spring, drops off a bit. And you can see that we've had some incredibly high captures. Here in April of 2018, we caught over 300 weevils in the traps. And then again in June 2021, we had another big year and caught another 300 or so weevils in those bucket traps. So those traps were averaging about 30 weevils per trap, which is a lot to have them out there. And you can see there is this cyclicity. They go up and down, drop in the winter, go back up, spring and early summer. The intensity of these peaks seems to vary somewhat throughout the year. This may be related to how wet, dry, or cold the winter period is. This other line, shown here in orange, that's bouncing around over the place, this is the sex ratio, or the percentage of the females that are caught in those traps. On average, we catch about 66% females in the traps. We think this is because they are attracted to the aggregation pheromone, which is a male-produced aggregation pheromone. So the females find this a bit more attractive than the males. The drone surveys that we fly over the top of the Sweetwater Reserve, we do this every 3 to 4 months, and we're doing this to monitor palm death. The drone flies on a pre-programmed flight route, which is controlled by a software that runs the drone. So it flies the same route every 3 to 4 months at the same height. It stops at the same spots, takes these aerial photographs from about 150 feet up, and then we can use them to plot the mortality of these palm trees in the Sweetwater Reserve. So here you can see some dead palm trees, some that are in the process of dying, some that are completely smashed down and died a long time ago from palm weevil attack. Basically, we've stitched these photographs together, and we've made a map of about 726 palm trees in the reserve that we are following. And the data are very clear here. We go out, do the surveillance every 3 to 4 months. When we started this process back in March of 2017, there was a standing mortality of around 7% or so. We've continued the data. We're just behind on analyzing it. But when we got up to February, we're now looking at about 40 to 45% of those palm trees have died. And the data are just going to continue to ramp upwards as these weevils continue to kill more palm trees in the Sweetwater Reserve. So there's an irony here. The parks managers love this because they're not having to control this invasive palm species anymore. The weevils are doing it for them. But then the people that live around the park aren't very happy about it because they're getting weevils flying into their gardens and streets and killing palm trees that are close by. So the driving survey that Christina and I do every 6 months shows a very similar trend. We started in August 2016. We tagged our 519 palms. None of them were dead. They all look nice and healthy. Now in August 2021, we're up to almost 60% of those 519 palms have been killed by the South American palm weevil. So it's having a significant impact on palm trees in the urban environment. So how do you protect these palms from attack? Right now, insecticides are the best method that we have of protecting palms from palm weevils. There's a couple of avenues that are used simultaneously. Systemic insecticides are applied to the palm. These travel inside the palm tree. They accumulate in the top of the palm where the crown is. And if you can get enough active ingredient up into that palm crown, as the weevil larvae and possibly the adults are feeding up there, they get a lethal dose and they end up dying. So these systemics can be applied as drenches into the crown. Homeowners are doing that. They're just mixing up the products in their buckets and just dumping it into the top of the crown. Soil injections into the roots, into the soil, so the roots take up the product and move it. You could even perhaps use it as a trunk paint, or sometimes trunk injections can be done as well. Don Hodel doesn't like damaging the trunks, doesn't recommend this because these wounds don't heal. And they may provide volatiles that attract weevils to palms. But then on the other hand, the professional applicators say you can plug these holes with silicon sealant like we saw in those previous photos, or you can just put in some silicon septums too, I think, which you can just reuse them and they seal over when the injection needles are pulled out. So these systemics target weevil larvae that are really feeding right at the top of the crown, that trunk area at the very top. And then the other approach is to use these contact insecticides that are applied to the foliage at the top of the palm. These leave lethal residues on the foliage that kill adult weevils that may be attracted to that palm tree. So with Ricardo and Rainbow Tree Care Scientific, we're running some long-term insecticide trials, looking at different products, application methods, and rates to figure out what are some of the better ways of using these products to get good control of these palm weevils inside these palm crowns. Okay, so this palm is in the Chula Vista area, and this is a palm that we observed during our driving surveys. And in August of 2018, well, I should step back a bit. February of 2018, I had this palm listed as dead. All it was just a trunk with a ring of fronds at the top of it. When we came back in August of 2018, I was expecting it to be completely brown and either standing there looking really sad or the homeowner had cut it down. But no, sprouting from the top of it were these carrot-like fronds that are like sprigging out at the top, and it was recovering. And the homeowner said he just got up in there, drenched the crown with, probably imidacloprid that he bought at Home Depot or Lowe's, and there must have been just enough apical meristem left in the top of that palm that it started coming back to life. February 2019, it's really sprouting hard and looking really quite healthy. August of 2019, it's really hard to say now that this palm had even been attacked a year ago by the South American Palm Weevil. And then February 2020 and August 2020, it was looking great. And then this happened. I guess the treatment stopped and the palm tree's gone back into decline again, and the palm weevil has obviously found it. So when we go back in February of 2022, it'll be interesting to see whether or not this palm is now completely dead, or whether the homeowner has reinvigorated his treatment programs and the palm has been brought back to life again. There are other instances that we've discovered during our driving surveys that palm trees can recover on their own. I was photographing this palm through a fence because it had this strange sprig-like growth coming out of the top of it, and the homeowners came over and wanted to know what I was doing, and I told them, and they didn't realize that this growth was coming out the top of the palm tree because they couldn't see it from their property side. So this palm has continued to flourish, and it looks like it's recovered on their own because they didn't apply any insecticides to that palm. And that was back in August of 2021. And then we went back and, I got those dates wrong. We just did this August 2021. That should have been February 2021. That lopsided growth is continuing to grow and the weevil hasn't found it again. And I'm assuming that the homeowners are not treating the palms with insecticides. So there's some interesting stuff going on out there with respect to treatments and their efficacy, how often you need to apply, and maybe not doing anything and palms recovering on their own if there's a little bit of undamaged apical meristem left at the top of that palm trunk. Okay, so we've finished some big studies looking at different traps. Ivan Milosavljevic, a postdoc in my lab, did a tremendous job looking at these different traps and trying to figure out, which trap should we be using to try and monitor South American palm weevil most effectively. Sweetwater Reserve, we're using this bucket trap. This is the traditional trap that's used for controlling palm weevils basically around the world, even the infamous red palm weevil. People use these bucket traps designed exactly the way we have them here. The FAO uses them for control of red palm weevil in date palms plantations in the Middle East. But there's this new weevil trap that's come out. It's called a percussion trap. Basically, it's an inverted cone that sits on the ground. The aggregation pheromone sits in this little green cap that sits on the top of the trap. The weevils are attracted to it. In this instance, since these percussion traps are put on the ground, the weevils land on the ground. They walk along the ground. They go up the side of the trap, which has these corrugations on the side to enable them to easily traverse this plastic cone, attracted to the pheromone, and then they drop into a hole. And then at that hole, it's basically funnel shaped. So the weevils, once they go in, if they try pushing up, they're hitting the lip of a funnel and they can't easily get back out again. So we ran these trapping studies, and the percussion trap was much more efficient at not only capturing, but retaining the weevils. We did some videography studies where we set video cameras up around these traps, and a lot of the weevils get attracted to the bucket trap, go in and out of the holes, and they just fly away. But with the percussion trap, once they go in the holes, about 98% of them stay in the hole and they can't get out again. And it's probably this trap design which is resulting in these traps capturing about 6 times more weevils. So then the other thing that we did with these traps is that we loaded them up with different types of fermenting bait. As I mentioned, we use dates and baker's yeast at the Sweetwater Reserve. Well, we also looked at dates and a wine yeast, dates and a beer making yeast. But the data were very clear across traps and bait type. The percussion trap was always the best, and traps that were baited with dates and baker's yeast also caught significantly more weevils. So the volatiles that are released from fermenting dates that are kick-started with baker's yeast seem to be more attractive than the volatiles that are released if you use a beer-making yeast or a wine-making yeast. And both of those yeasts, all three of them are commercially available, but the baker's yeast is most easily picked up at the supermarket, or you can buy it online through Amazon. So some caveats for using these traps. Trap placement. Don't hang your traps near the palm trees. There's a growing body of evidence that these traps can attract weevils. If they don't go in the traps, especially if you're using those bucket traps, they may end up attacking the palm trees that you're trying to protect. The reason for this, the traps are not 100% efficient in capturing weevils. The trapping efficiency of those bucket traps is around 60%. The trapping efficiency of the percussion trap is around 98%. Ah, there you go. Oh, it's even worse than that. I got those numbers, yeah, about right. Single bucket trap only captures about 30% of the weevils that are attracted to it. And that was data that we figured out by setting up video cameras around these traps to figure out how many weevils were actually going in and being retained by those traps. Sun exposure is something else that's really important. If you put your traps out in full sun or they're exposed to the high midday sun, your traps catch low numbers of weevils. If the traps are in the partial or full shade, weevil captures tend to be highest. We think the reason for this is that if the traps are sitting in the sun, they get superheated. Thermometers that have been put in these traps suggest that temperatures can exceed 60 degrees Celsius or more than 140 degrees Fahrenheit. This probably has a really detrimental effect on the pheromone and the attractiveness of the baits that have been put into those traps. So some take-home messages for these traps. Which trap should you use? We're strongly suggesting that if you're going to be investing money in traps, you should use the commercially available percussion trap, as it's far superior to the bucket trap. Bait type. Percussion and a lure only seems to be fairly good for attracting weevils and capturing them. Maybe it's good for detecting whether or not you have weevils in your area. If you want to use the traps more as a control, we're suggesting that you use percussion, you use the aggregation pheromone, and then the fermenting bait that you load into that trap should be a mixture of dates, that's the sugar source, some water, and baker's yeast. And that may be good to pull numbers down, weevil numbers down in a localized area. Trap placement. Don't place your traps on palms. If you are concerned about weevil activity in a sensitive palm area, I think one way that you could use these traps would be maybe to put your traps within a half-mile radius or maybe a mile radius around the area of concern. If you get weevils in those traps, it's likely that the palm trees that you're most worried about could be subjected to weevil interest or arrival at some stage, and you might want to begin thinking about prophylactically treating those palms. You don't have to worry about where you put the traps. You can put them basically in a pile of sand and rocks. If they're in the shade, the weevils will still be attracted to the pheromone and they'll still be attracted to that fermenting bait. And we recommend that you put your traps in the shade. Don't do this. This is in Orange County, some fantastic Canary Island date palms. All of the date palm, Canary Island palms in this row had percussion traps, which are supposed to be on the ground. Whoever engineered this was pretty clever, managed to get them way up into the crown here. The bottom sealed in so it didn't drop out, loaded with fermenting bait and pheromone. And basically all you could see here was like columns of pheromone wafting up into the sky, probably with the potential to attract palm weevils from 100 miles or more away. So don't set up your percussion traps or any types of traps on the palm trees that you're concerned about protecting. You capture weevils in these traps, that would be great, but any weevils that come to the traps and are not caught will just basically fly up into the crown of these palms and could potentially begin an infestation. Will other weevils enter the traps? Very rarely. We have caught these agave snout weevils, and I just had a report from a homeowner who may have caught a large cactus weevil, which looks similar to the agave snout weevil. It seems to be intermediate in size between agave snout weevil and the South American palm weevil. But the agave snout weevil and the cactus weevil both have these really thick, highly recurved snouts or proboscis, noses. And when you compare that to the South American palm weevil, which tends to be larger, the rostrums or snouts tend to be thinner and not as heavily curved as these cactus or agave snout weevils. Those non-target weevils are not attracted to the pheromone. they're probably responding to the fermentation volatiles that have been released from the bait that's inside the trap. But these captures are extremely rare. You're more likely to get South American palm weevils in your traps than these agave or cactus weevils. If you are trapping, you're almost certainly going to find weevils that are covered with these phoretic mites. There are at least 3 species of these mites attached to these weevils. The work that we've just been doing with a mite taxonomist, Hans Klompken, out at the Ohio State University suggests that we have at least 2 new undescribed species associated with South American palm weevils that have not been previously recorded from the United States before, let alone California. These mites are not natural enemies. They feed on the rotting palm material, and they use the weevils basically to get from rotting palm to rotting palm. So since they feed on the same types of material, these mites have a good strategy figured out. They know that the weevil is going to take them to the next palm tree. That's great for the mites because they can't fly, but the weevil delivers them directly to the types of food that they need to feed on. So biological control, this is a project that we had funded to go to Brazil to do for a year. We had USDA funding for this, but everything got shut down because of COVID. The grant was for 1 year. We couldn't do anything over that 1 year period, so we had to return the grant money to the USDA. So at some stage, I'm going to have to look at trying to resurrect this. But there are these parasitic flies that attack the larvae and the pupae of South American palm weevil in Brazil. The biology and behavior and ecology of these flies are very poorly studied, and we know next to nothing about them. We don't even know if we can artificially rear them in the laboratory. And that would be a first step to beginning any biocontrol program. We'd have to figure out if we can get these flies to mate and lay eggs on weevil larvae in the lab. Now, the data that has come out of Brazil, there are 2 papers published on this by the same lab working in oil palm plantations in Brazil. Their data suggests that these flies cause significant mortality to South American palm weevils. Parasitism averages anywhere from about 30 to 70%, averages around 50% year round. Each parasitized weevil produces about 18 flies, which is a great return on investment. You kill 1 weevil, you get 18 flies on average that hatch out of these pupal cocoons. And in Brazil, at least, it attacks other pest species of weevils that infest the palms. This is something we probably don't have to worry about in California because we only have 1 species of palm-killing weevil here, and that's the South American palm weevil. Potential use for in California, it's possible, but we need to get the Brazil to do some basic fundamental work on this, and we haven't been able to do that yet. But this is something that we should be thinking about. So, excuse me. This is our website. We are relying on community scientists to help provide updates on where the weevil is being found and to provide reports on infested palm trees. The site provides information on South American palm weevil, and we have basically a reporting page that you can click on. You can see it down here. Click to report infested palms. You don't have to worry about anything with the web address there. If you have your cell phones handy, you can bring up the QR or quick code reader and just scan this, or take a photo of it and do it later. And you can access the website directly from this QR code. And it'll take you to the website. And if you're finding weevils, please report the address. If you've got photographs, if you know the species of palm that's being attacked, all of those data are really helpful to us to figure out what the South American palm weevil is doing here. And it provides new information for us to share with you in presentations like this. Okay, so since I have the captive audience here, I'm going to ask for help with another project if possible. Avocado Lacebug has flared up again in San Diego County. It's now out in LA County. It's in Riverside County. We studied this pest way back in 2004 in Chula Vista and National City down in San Diego County, and the pest population kind of fizzled out and it really didn't do anything. And then a couple of years ago, or maybe around 2017 or so, it's come back with a vengeance. And the DNA data suggests that we've had a second invasion of Avocado Lacebug into California. So the original infestation back in 2004 came from Mexico. The new invasion that we picked up around 2017 appears to have originated from Florida. We would like to go back to the original study sites we had in 2004 in Chula Vista and National City, and we were doing these surveys on backyard avocados. I've had emails out to master gardeners and the California Rare Fruit Growers Association, and I'm asking now if anybody has avocados in their backyards, or they know of neighbors who have the Avocado Lacebug infesting their avocados in the Chula Vista and National City area of San Diego. That would be really great. We originally did these studies with a collaborator down there. His name was Charles Robinson, and I don't have his contact details anymore, but I think he was a master gardener. And if anybody knows Charles or knows who may be managing his property now, if they could let me know through my email address here, mark.hoddle@ucr.edu, that would be really tremendous. These two photographs show the Avocado Lacebug adult. It's a very distinctive insect that you'll see on the undersides of the leaves. And the feeding damage that the nymphs and the adults cause result in these necrotic islands that tend to be centrally placed in the leaf. So very easy to identify from Persea mite damage. Some acknowledgements. We've had funding from CDFA Specialty Crops, the USDA, California Date Commission, and West Coast arborists have helped us out a lot. We've had quite a few people helping with various aspects of this project as well. And do I have time to show a very small video on this thing?
Yes.
Okay, all right, let's check out the video.
Yep.
Can you hear that now? Okay, great.
Yes.
Ah, Southern California. You know, the whole surf's up, Tinseltown, sun-soaked glamour thing. Too bad this idyllic landscape is mostly make-believe. Take the palm trees. They're not even real trees. They're more closely related to grass. And they're imported. Like this Canary Island date palm. It came halfway around the world to be one of the more dazzling stars in the landscape. But this Hollywood success story is turning into a horror movie. This little monster is the South American Palm Weevil. Scientists first found it in San Diego in 2011. Weevils are just beetles with snouts. This female uses hers as a drill to get at the palm's apical meristem. It's a bowl of juicy goodness at the top where the leaves sprout. She lays her eggs down in those tunnels. And her spawn eat the palm from the inside out, starting with its heart. That's right, it's the same stuff you can get at a supermarket. They'll turn this palm's healthy flesh into a rotting mess that smells like a dumpster in the sun. Once they're big enough, the larvae will spin cigar-shaped cocoons from the leftover fibers they can't eat. As the trees fronds, starve, and die, the larvae hang out and gestate, morphing into pupae and... Ew, that's just... Oh man, that's gross. As adults, they burst out, take flight, and seek out a new host, leaving behind the dying hollow shell of a once majestic palm. Mark Hoddle at UC Riverside is tracking the weevil infestation. He puts them on a kind of aerial treadmill in his lab to test their stamina. He's trying to figure out how they got here, whether they hitched a ride on imported palms or made the trip themselves. Turns out they can fly up to 15 miles a day, enough to hopscotch from palm to palm on their own. The only way to stop them? Treat every palm tree in their path with pesticides before the weevils get there. That'll be tough to do. So these particular botanical icons could be on the fast track to being just another Hollywood has-been. These weevils are pretty gnarly, so we asked Anna Rothschild from Gross Science to do those animations for us. Thanks, Anna.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. I love gross stuff.
So there is one other way to manage these larvae, sort of a biological control, which people do in some places like Thailand, Peru, and Ghana.
Entomophagy.
Eating bugs. Tasty.
So hop over to my channel for a whole episode about it.
And thanks for watching this deep look.
All right, that's it. If you've got any questions and if there's time, I'll try and answer a few of those for you.
All right, that was excellent presentation, Mark.
Thank
Really
you.
enlightening. There is one from Cart. Would you like to add or include the CIP's location on Port of San Diego tideland into the database?
Yes, any data people can provide us, yes, we would like to receive those, please. Thank you.
Okay. And there was one comment at the top from Cabos to Tijuana, no lunch vegetation, so could be a reason for the slow movement.
Yes.
Yeah. And one more question came in from Amy. Have you seen an increase in the weevil because of the heat?
Yeah, this is something that we are struggling to understand right now, is how temperature drives the not only the growth rate, but then the population size that results from this. My feeling is that once those weevils are inside those palm trees, they're pretty well insulated from, extreme heat and extreme cold. And this may be, if you just extend that idea a little bit further, the red palm weevil, which is well established through the Middle East, and we've worked on that for several years in Saudi Arabia, it gets wickedly hot in those parts of the world. And it's basically what you see on TV. It's just sand and palm trees and a lot of heat. And the weevil has done, and this weevil came from the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia, and it's basically thriving in a xeric, very hot desert habitat. So I think once they get into the palm, it's almost like a thermos, all that material is probably protecting them from extreme heat, extreme cold, and it's very wet because these palms get, very well irrigated. So they're not under any sort of water stress as well. And we know that these weevils really like a damp breeding environment within the palm trees. Sometimes we take these palms down and that bowl at the top is basically filled with water. And the weevils look like they're swimming around in there, and they seem they're just fine. It's a remarkable insect. They're all remarkable for what they've been able to do, to go from the tropics to these hot xeric areas. Even San Diego is technically a type of desert, I guess, and but it's highly modified, right? We've irrigated and we've planted all sorts of palm trees that shouldn't be there, and we've just provided a massive buffet for this weevil to feed on.
There's one more question came in from Nan. I wonder what happened to the Canary Islands or the palms of the Canary Islands.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So several years ago, Canary Islands, where the Canary Island date palm is native, was invaded by the red palm weevil and started killing the native palms there, the native Canary Island date palm, which is obviously a massively important genetic resource for that palm species. Well, I guess the Spanish guys, they jumped on it pretty quickly, wrapped it up, and from my understanding is that they successfully eradicated red palm weevil from the Canary Islands. There's a whole other story associated with red palm weevil, and Mohammed's here, and he was part of this big program, is that when we started dealing with South American palm weevil back around 2010 or so, we were dealing with another palm weevil that had established in Laguna Beach. This was Rhynchophorus vulneratus, which is black with a red stripe down its back. And the DNA work suggested that weevil had somehow come from Indonesia, maybe the island of Bali, and had established somehow in Laguna Beach. So while the CDFA and the USDA were like busily, and us, sort of like trying to wrap our arms around the invasion of this red striped palm weevil from Indonesia and Laguna Beach, basically sneaking in the back door at the same time was the South American palm weevil. And there just didn't seem to be enough resources to deal with both invasions at once. So we managed to eradicate the Indonesian weevil, but the South American palm weevil got a foothold and has continued to spread. Yeah.
Someone asked, any work on the attract and kill pheromone?
Thank you for asking that. Is that from somebody in San Diego County Ag Commissioner's office?
It's from David Drucker.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah, we have applied. We have sent in a project suggestion to the California Department of Food and Ag Specialty Crops program to run a huge attract and kill program for South American palm weevil in San Diego County. And the way attract and kill works is, instead of putting out the traps that I've showed you, you can buy commercially a waxy matrix that you basically put, it comes in like a caulking gun tube, and you can just squirt a bit of this stuff out, about a dollop. It's called, they refer to them as dollops, and they're about the size of a quarter. And that dollop, which is basically that waxy material, is impregnated with the aggregation pheromone and a contact insecticide. And you can put these on the sides of trees, fences, lampposts, the concrete side, it doesn't really matter. And the weevils are attracted to that dollop because they can smell the aggregation pheromone. They come to and start touching it. Then they get a lethal dose of that contact insecticide and they die. And the really nice thing about this approach is that you don't have to worry about the traps. You can put these dollops at a minimum of 2 meters above the ground so people and pets and that won't touch them. And then the weevils they can't help themselves. They smell that pheromone, they want to go to it. And if you can put enough dollops out, the idea is that you can drive these weevils down to really low numbers without having to spray thousands of palm trees or put bucket traps or percussion traps all over the place. So that project suggestion is still under review, and I'm thinking that we might hear about it sometime this month, and hopefully we'll get an invitation to develop the full grant. And if we're really lucky, we'd get the money to run that project. It's going to be big and expensive, and it's going to require a lot of manpower to get out there. So those dollops need to be replaced every 3 months. So we're putting out thousands of them. It's going to be a big job, big logistical problem for us to deal with.
Thank you. Are the treatments mentioned reactive, or they are being used preventatively?
People are doing both. So some folks that are worried about their palms and they think that the weevil's getting too close to them, or they may have had their neighbors' palm trees die, will begin prophylactic treatments. And there are some instances, and Ricardo's probably better able to address this, where you can use it remedially to try and cure the palm tree of an infestation if you catch it at an early enough stage and there's enough apical meristem left at the top of the trunk for the palm to recover. And we showed some photographs of that. But then the thing is, as I showed in that series of photos, once you're committed to that program, you're committed to it for life. You step off the program, the weevils come back and kill your palm trees. And we were really surprised to see that palm tree in Bonita that had looked like it was dead, resurrected, and then it's gone back into decline again. So yeah, once you're on the program, you got to keep it up, or else you're just wasting your money and time.
All right. Thank you, Mark. It was really enlightening, and everything was really great.
Super. All right. Have a good morning, everybody. I hope the rest of the meeting goes well.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. So our next presenter today is Ricardo Agolier. He is the president of the Agolier Plant Care Company based in Greater San Diego area. He has a lot of experience in the landscaping and real time, basically ground level experience. So he's going to share his experience about managing this South American palm weevil today. With that, I'll pass it to Ricardo.
Great. Okay, so yes, my name is Ricardo. I'm president of Aguilar Plant Care. We're a treatment specialty company. We're out of San Marcos, and pretty much we've been involved with the palm weevil and management of the palm weevil pretty much since it first got to San Isidro in the Bonita area. And we've had to develop and kind of try to evolve the way we approach managing this nasty pest from killing many palm trees. And so I was just going to run down some treatment options that are available for the landscape setting, and for either professional or residential folks out there. And just so you know what options we've seen be effective in managing this pest. And we'll go from there. But just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a PCA. This isn't a recommendation. So I might shy away from giving you exact products. Usually that's a question that I get. What product? Where can I get it? What's the rate? I'm just going to give you some active ingredients and some of the things that we've done, and that not only with the trials that we've done with Rainbow and Mark, but also with our own experience. So I'm just going to share what's working best for us. And if you have any specific questions, I can take those questions on the side, or you can, and I'll give you all my contact info at the end. So again, I want to update you as well. I know most of you are here in the San Diego area, so I know you're well aware of where the weevil is located. There might be some of you that are in Orange County or LA and want to know where the weevil's currently at. As Mark kind of touched on too, the host list is rapidly growing, I'd say in this past year. And so I'll go over some locations that we've been mapping. We have our own mapping software, and pretty much we're mapping it just us driving around, calls that we get from homeowners. And, you know, we're just kind of tracking the movement of this palm weevil. And so I'll share that with you. I'll just touch quickly on how we arrived to the current management protocols that we've developed for the palm weevil. As I mentioned, we've been evolving and trying since pretty much day one. I think the first time we really approached treatment was around 2014, 2015. And at that time, we really didn't know what we were going after. We were just seeing an infected palm, and we just kind of threw something at it and trying to see if, and it wasn't really till 2016, 2017, where more education started coming out. And, you know, again, we've evolved to a certain point, and I'll share that with you as well. I wanted to go over some symptoms. I know a lot of you, I saw in the poll early on that there's a lot of professionals in this group, which is great. But we are getting a lot of false, I guess, positives. We get some that could be palm weevil, but could also be something else. And I just want to give you some tips on some symptoms and how to identify it. Same thing, Mark shared a couple of results from treatments and no treatments and how the palm can recover. So I'll share that with you as well. And then again, I'd love to take some questions at the very end. But yeah, I'll start off here with it might be kind of hard to see, so see here if you can tell, but this is as of the January 1st, 2018. These were just, if you can see the red dots on the map, those are just confirmed palm weevil deaths that we either saw ourselves or they were reported to us by members of the PTCA. They were really instrumental in giving me a heads up. Hey, I got a dead palm here in Spring Valley, and we'd go out, we'd confirm it, and we put it on our map. So this is January 1st, 2018. Relatively scattered out. You know, obviously it started in the Bonita area, but you can see it's kind of scattered out. January 1st, 2019, you can kind of see the difference. It hasn't really spread north, like Mark said. It's relatively slow, but you notice those pockets in the south, how it just became a little more swollen, and it kind of more became established in that specific area. Again, it's just a quick 2018 to 2019, and then the January 1st, 2020. Again, not really moving north, but those areas are becoming a little more saturated, where it's kind of spreading within that initial area. So again, just a quick 2019 to 2020. You can see that Presidio, Old Town area was really where it was at on January 1st of 2020. January 2020 to 2021, which we're in now, obviously, has kind of been the biggest jump that I've seen. As of 2020, January 1st, it really was concentrated no further than the 8 freeway. There may have been a couple in the Friars Road area, but really just hung out in that 8 sector south. January 1st, 2021, as you can see, we got a really big jump to the La Jolla area. and also further north to the Rancho Santa Fe area that we were able to confirm multiple deaths up there. If you can see, I don't have a pointer, but if you can see that teal mark at the very end of, as you can see, from 20 to 2021, we got a really big jump in the distance of the weevil and the concentration in the La Jolla area. This is currently, as of today, the reason the color changed is because we added different species, same how Mark mentioned. We now have a Chilean, we have a Bismarck, and a Parajubea that also Mark mentioned in the San Diego Zoo. So just in the 9 months this year, we've seen the species of the weevil also jump, which has been very concerning. Mark made some great points that there's just a lot of variety here, and I think the weevils are just becoming very interested in trying different species of palm. And I'll go through some of them as well, but I just wanted to kind of share with you kind of what the locations that we're seeing. So again, kind of hard to see because I tried to cram both maps in there, but just a contrast from January 1st, 2018 to currently. It's safe to say the weevils pretty much throughout the county. Again, the furthest north that we've been able to confirm is Rancho Santa Fe area, Solana Beach. I'll go over some trappings, but we have trapped 2 adults within a year in the Carlsbad area near Legoland. So it's definitely going north, and it's the concerning part is spreading to different species of palms. But just a couple bullet points to date. I believe it's still preferring canary palms. 99% to 98% still prefers Canariensis to most palms. It might try a different palm, but I think canaries are definitely top of the list. As I mentioned, December 2020, we got called out for this Chilean wine palm in the Bejo area. And from a distance, it looks fairly normal. I walking up to it, I didn't really notice anything wrong with it. But as we got closer, the homeowner was able to, share with us that he found quite a bit of alarming, but he did find cocoons and 2 adults. So yeah, that was kind of the first confirmed case that we saw on something besides a canary. As Mark shared, the inside of the palm was completely chewed up to where there was really nothing sustainable in there. So the palm was unfortunately dead. Later, the homeowner sent me that picture that he ended up just removing the whole thing. So it's terrible to see because the palm that big takes a long time to get that large. Also, touch base on it, but as of March of 2021, he did tell me that there was other palms in the Balboa Park area that were being attacked and killed by the palm weevil. But again, canaries were the favorite. Just a month ago in August, we received a call from a homeowner with the Bismarckia in the Mission Hills area. There was canary palms. His neighbor, he didn't have a canary, but somehow he was getting these adult weevils. They were literally crawling on his palm. They were trying to get in. The palm itself was fine, but he literally had a collection of just weevils like they were trying to attack, and he was just collecting them. He didn't know what to do with them. He just stored them in a garage. But that was on a Bismarckia in August. We ended up treating prophylactically, so with some systemics and some contacts, and hoping that the palm just doesn't get attacked. The palm was healthy, but he was coming home from work and he would find 2 or 3 crawling at the base of the palm, so that was pretty concerning. This one was actually last week. This was another Bismarckia in La Jolla, and this one was dead. The homeowner, I didn't attach the picture, but the homeowner had a lot of cocoons. We couldn't find an adult, but he had a lot of cocoons at the base of the palm. And he had 2 other Bismarckias that weren't attacked. So we told him, take this one out. And we're going to go ahead and treat the other ones to try to protect it. But this was just last week. Mark mentioned it also, but the San Diego Zoo, we were down there a week or so ago, and we're trying to put together some kind of plan where it can be safe to apply to try to protect this Parajubea that was attacked. We're going through different options. Obviously, the zoo is a very sensitive location, and how can we treat this palm and still be safe and not injure any other plants or animals nearby. So this one's going to take some coordinating, but we're trying to work and trying to figure something out. So this was another new pest or a palm that we encountered. And in talking to Christy down at the zoo, she just kind of informed me that they currently have 8 traps set up throughout the park. They check them every month. They replace the food. They count the males and females. But just up to date, just this year, 2021, they've caught over 100 adults. So very, very active right now near the zoo. And that's probably why they're trying different species of palms. So yeah, now that you kind of know where the location of the palms are or the weevil is, kind of they're starting to spread their desired host. What can you do as a landscape professional to help protect not only your clients' palms, but your palms? And how can we take an IPM approach to be as safe as possible and really try to do this the right way, but still try to protect our palms? So we're in a unique situation. But just a quick recap, IPM is something that is an eco-based strategy that focuses on long-term protection or control of the pest without having any being as safe as possible. Pesticides are really the last option. They're only needed if you exerted all these other options to try to physically remove the pest, or you change the plant material or do something to save the environment or not harm the environment, but again, still trying to get pest control. One of the bigger issues I see with not practicing proper IPM is you're not really monitoring, or you just treat for the heck of it. You really need to have a plan, and I'll go over the proper way to monitor. Once you monitor, then you can start putting together a management plan that includes insecticides. But this is just one of the options for monitor stations. Are relatively easy. We have several customers of ours that we set these up and we manage them on a monthly basis, and it's a really good way to know if how heavy the pest pressure is. This is the bucket trap. Mark has this really good step-by-step. This is a little cheaper, but this is also very effective in helping you manage and see how much activity you have of weevil. So there's just a couple examples. This is us. We checked the Balboa Park. We have 16 stations set up, and we check them on a monthly basis. You replace the food, the yeast, and the water, and we separate them here to sex them between the males and females. This is another example. And this is the Carlsbad ones that I mentioned to Mark. The one on the left is that's October 2020. This is off of Faraday in Carlsbad. We only caught one out of 4 stations that we have set up for this specific commercial site. And then the last one we caught was in August to the right there, also on the same location, Faraday and El Camino. So those to me are the furthest north. I live in San Marcos. I have one set up. I don't have any canaries nearby me, so I have one in my home, and I haven't caught anything yet. So it's definitely coming, but it's not very saturated as far as the activity. This is another one that we catch pretty frequently. This is the Gabi. You can see the difference in size. Recently, we've been catching a lot of these. And as you guys know, that's the June beetle. But the reason I show those is if you're catching those and not palm weevils, maybe you still have a little bit of time to be, before you start making insecticide applications, or you don't need to freak out as much. Have a plan, but you can still hold off on doing any type of treatments if you're in the north area, Orange County, Oceanside, Carlsbad. I really haven't seen anything yet as very consistent. You might get an adult here and there, but you still have some time to make a plan. Just some more pictures, but some other symptoms that we're getting calls on, and it's our job to really educate the customer or the client that calls and asks, I think I have palm weevil. And so when we go check it, these are some that we've kind of seen recently. Is if you can see on the fan palm on the left, there's a couple holes. There's one kind of near the top there in the trunk. And then if you look on the left lower area, there's another hole. They're about a little smaller than a golf ball. And we weren't exactly sure what caused this. I don't know if it was a bird or physical or man-made, but there were just a couple holes. The palm itself was fine, but not palm weevil. The one on the right is a queen palm that fell over. Same thing, we came and inspected, and we don't believe it's palm weevil. I think it's just some kind of decay inside the trunk, something fungal, but again, not palm weevil. Palm weevil attacks the meristem. This is a common one that we got earlier in the year. I know we didn't get much rain, but these petiole bases that just fall off the canary, customers will send this and ask if they have palm weevil, and you reassure them it's not palm weevil, but it's just natural, that those fall off and it's perfectly fine. A lot of times we see this after rain, they just get saturated or it hasn't been pruned in a long time, but perfectly normal. This is an interesting one. The one on the far left was in Carlsbad a couple years back. It definitely gives you the symptoms. It gives you that flat top look, and it's very concerning. There was even I don't know if you can see the flag near the middle there, but there was a trap station set up there, I believe by Mark, but this was over in the Carlsbad off the 5 area. And what I believe was it was herbicide damage. As you can see, they sprayed that Arundel looking weed material there. And there's a good chance that that palm was accidentally hit or maybe purposely hit, but it wasn't palm weevil. I think the palm was removed and they weren't able to extract anything from it. Same with the one on the right. It has the classic symptoms. This was over in Encinitas, I believe. And I mean, from visual, it looks just like it. After some investigation, it turned out that the neighbor behind this was renovating the house, didn't like the palm, and put herbicide at the base of the palm that went into their yard and eventually killed the palm. But same, it does take some investigation. You can't just assume it's palm weevil and treat. You have to have a plan and make sure that you are dealing with an infestation. Here to the left is, we get this quite a bit too. It's not palm weevil. It's many of you are probably screaming, it's Fusarium wilt. So unfortunately, these palms are, if they're not going to be hit by palm weevil, they're likely to get Fusarium wilt. So I'm afraid that they just don't have a very long future. And so, yeah, that was one that we broke the news that it's not palm weevil, good news, but it's Fusarium, so you're going to have to remove it anyway. The one on the right is nutrient deficiency. It's nothing dying near the top, no Fusarium, it's just nutrient deficiency. So we've gotten that one on a nutrient program, but I just wanted to share a couple of symptoms, false symptoms that we get, lookalikes, if you will. Here are some symptoms of palm weevil that we've been able to kind of catch. If you can see on the palm, looks like it's chewed. There's another picture. It's kind of hard to tell in this background. But those are the chewing marks, and this palm had about 3 or 4 fronds that had chewing marks. And when you see that, that's an early indication that there might be some activity in the palm. Here's a little more advanced. If you see the arrow there in the middle, the palm is green. It looks pretty lush, but that meristem area looks a little thin. To me, this palm has been attacked. I don't know how to do the pointer, but if you look at the bottom, that was the meristem. It kind of fell over. So the palm is still green, the meristem kind of fell over. And so to me, this palm has been attacked and it's already starting to decline. Here's a little more advanced on the left. You start getting that flattening. What happens too is you start to get that the top part start to die off. To me, this is starting to advance to the point where treatment is not going to do anything at this point. And even the far right is a little further advanced than that, where now you got, maybe 75% of whatever's left is starting to wilt and die. And to me, this palm is dead. Same, it's starting to flatten a little more on the left-hand side there. At this point, I don't believe any type of treatment would rescue this type of palm at this stage in decline. And the one on the right, same thing. It's now it's almost a perfect flat top, and this palm was eventually removed as well. Just another example. And obviously the ones on the right are completely dead. Once you get that complete brown, those palms are dead, and I'm not sure what's with that right one, if it's still there or not. But as far as management steps, now that we've identified the general area of where the palm weevils are located and where they're most active, if you're in that active zone, you need to make a plan. If you're outside of that area further north, make a tentative plan, but know that it is coming, and it is coming your way at this speed. Correctly monitor. Once you monitor, once you ID the pest, that's a big goal there, and have correct symptoms identification. If you don't have the symptoms, there's no need to panic. You still have time to make a plan for that. And just keep in mind that the guidelines of making sure you have a goal to reach that target pest, which is the palm weevil, that in a manner that minimizes risk to the environment. But the way we've developed our treatment, especially at the very beginning, we pretty much had to research and Google anything and everything that was related to palm weevil. We obviously looked up the red palm weevil and how that was eradicated. We looked at the University of Florida. Dr. Hoddle had some great literature. Don Hodel had some great literature as well, dating back to 2016. And so you take all these suggestions and you kind of put something together. The thing that really put it over the top for me, as far as knowing how to approach this pest and how to manage it, was 2019, we started a trial at the Bonita Golf Course and also at Glen Abbey Cemetery, right across the street from the Sweetwater Preserve that Mark references quite a bit. So we went around, we had about 50 palm trees that we tagged, and we were going to try different insecticide applications, different application methods, and then different intervals. And we wanted to kind of see what worked the best, and that way we can proceed with a management practice that we can share with everyone. So this is just an overlay of the palms that we ended up treating over at Glen Abbey. And every palm had a different approach. We either did a basal trunk application using a systemic insecticide, a dinotefron. We did different combinations as well. But this was one form of treatment. As you can see, some palms in the far back are completely dead. So this area was very active. So this was one approach in treatment that we did. We did a micro trunk injection to the base of the palm. Same thing, we used different variations of insecticides. We did an H2 injection. This is a really neat gun and a tool that is very effective. But same thing, we applied it to the root ball and to the immediate soil there of each palm. And then we also tried a crown spraying. Over a couple of years of trying and tracking and seeing which palms are dying, we had some good results and some not so good results. And I'm sure the Rainbow folks, Brian, will be sharing those with you in the next talk, I believe tomorrow. So I don't have too much of the data. I did, take out from just my hands-on trial was toolbox approach. There's very different ways you can approach a treatment to a palm. And so the more options you have, the better. So one of the ways you can approach, and we've had really good success with, is, and Mark mentioned too, that some homeowners have the capability to get up on a ladder and drench the head. But crown spraying, a contact insecticide will target adults, anything crawling around. And then the systemic insecticide will help provide a local systemic that will protect that tissue and that meristem part. So getting a spray to the crown of the palm will allow to protect that meristem where they're feeding. We had the best success with a combination of using an imidacloprid and a dinotefron. Combine those, a good contact insecticide like a bifenthrin or permethrin. If you can apply some kind of variation, I don't know if we have the complete data yet, but some kind of variation of a systemic and I believe is the best way to treat when you do a crown spray, because you're getting it right to the source where they're trying to attack. And we're having good success treating about every 4 to 6 months. It just kind of depends on the weather. And again, monitor how active is your area that you're in. Is your palm under constant threat or not so much? So it just depends on where you're located and how active you need to be with your applications. There's a little video, I don't know if you can see it, but just really focusing on just that meristem area. Once you soak it, it really helps. Just soaks down right into the meristem. There's really no need to spray the outer canopy of it. It just soaks right in there. But like with most things, there's always a negative side to it or a challenge. And crown spraying is a very big challenge with some of these bigger, older, more mature palms. Height, we can't possibly do a crown spray with a palm that's upwards of 60 feet. Now you're looking at drift and other variables. Trying to spray in this type of neighborhood where you have cars, close, residential units, probably not the safest option. Also overspray to undesired areas. You have birds and owls and fish and bees. There's a lot of things that a spray may not be the best option for you. So you just need to take that into consideration. You can't make the spraying your only option. So again, the toolbox approach is really the way to go. Another option for treatment we've seen success with is a soil systemic, applying it to the root ball. It's hard to tell in this picture, but we're drenching on the grass here, but it's starting to fill up and puddle closer to the root ball. So that's telling me that we're getting it into that area where the roots are at. Same thing, either or. I don't have the data to really show, but a combination of imidacloprid, a dinotefron, one or both. I think as long as you get some kind of systemic in there, that's really the best when you're doing this type of treatment. Same thing, just depends on your pest pressure in your region, where you're located. But every 4 to 6 months, I believe, would be sufficient to apply this type of treatment. Here's a video, sorry for the... Sorry about that. But this is using the HTI gun. So with that gun, we have a concentrated material in the backpack, and we place milliliters at a time per injection site. So we're getting a combination of the imidacloprid and dinotefron. Sorry. Backpack's very loud, by the way. But it does make it fairly efficient to where you're not having to get lots and lots of volume into the root ball. You can just get milliliters at a time, probably about 2 gallons per palm, and you would be sufficiently treating that palm with a systemic. Possible issues. Not every site is perfectly irrigated on grass, where it can easily uptake everything. We'll run into this, especially in a landscape setting. Very compacted soils, no irrigation, and it makes it challenging to apply that soil application. Another issue with having soil systemics, it's a very slow uptake. Most products you're probably looking at about 60 days or more to completely translocate. So in that time, your palm is likely to be attacked if you're in a specific area. Here's another one we ran into in PV. There's literally nowhere to treat. She's got hardscape everywhere, plants everywhere. And so soil conditions make it challenging to have that soil only approach. So again, having a toolbox approach where you have different options is the way to go. Here's another one, the Spring Valley Swap Meet. It's a site that we've been taking care of for about 3 years. And I'll speak a little bit about it later, but yeah, there's literally no water, nowhere to put the material down in there. So it's really not even going to uptake. One of the last options is a basal spray, spraying the trunk. This is a really simple way to get a systemic insecticide into the base of the palm. It's going to absorb and go with the new growth. It's a fairly easy application with the backpack. It's a quick uptake. And there's less secondary issues of spraying and soil and things like that. But again, some possible issues, like in this situation, we had a challenging time because when you're using that high concentrated material, you might burn that ivy that's growing at the base. That could be a problem. I don't think it lasts very long. I think again, I think Rainbow's going to speak on this tomorrow, but the longevity of the material is not very long, so you're going to have to reapply. And using a concentrated weight is very costly, and it just adds up. And again, knowing the structure of the palm, not 100% sure it's been our best performer as far as results in our trials. Palms are kind of hit and miss on if it's really effective. So we've had a hard time with this specific application. There are other treatment options out there, palm injections. Not a big fan. I come from that school of thought as well, that palms are not meant to be injected. But again, if that's your last option, it's an option. It's a way to get the systemic insecticide directly into the palm. Very minimal environmental exposures. But again, I think the negatives weigh them and see what you're willing to, if you want to take that challenge. But you could injure the palm, you could spread disease. Fusarium, are you moving from one palm to the next and possibly transmitting some kind of disease? That's an option. I don't know, with the bundles that palms have, I don't know if it's been our best performer, to be honest. Brian might have the data to show otherwise, but I personally haven't seen too much very good results with the trunk injections. Mark did mention this hook. It's an attractant compound, and I've been excited about this one. I haven't heard anything new because we haven't been able to go to seminars in the past year or so. That's really where I caught wind of this, and I'd like to learn more about it. It might be a viable option in some situations, but this seems fairly promising, and I'm glad Mark hit on it. I don't know if it's even registered in California. I don't know where it's at, but this could be another option down the road. And if I got a little bit of time left, I just wanted to kind of show you some of the results that we've seen. It's been fairly positive. So this was one a couple miles from the golf course doing trials. Obviously, the palm looks attacked. When we get to this situation, you try to inform the homeowner as best as possible that likelihood of survival is very, very slim. And you explain everything. That's the one they had, so they were willing to take a shot. So we did an application. It's still ongoing, but as you can see, the palm did recover and it is still growing. So that's a positive sign there. This is one that I showed earlier with the missing meristem. This one was an interesting one. Same thing, we treated, gave the whole rundown that the likelihood of survival is not good. But same thing, 6-7 months later, we were able to see the palm regrow. Since then, the homeowner has taken over and he made some kind of contraption that he can get from the roof and treat the palm. He's been able to treat, which has been great. And hopefully the palm's alive. This was a neat one too. The palm in the background has been removed since, but their palm is still alive, and we're treating. They're here in Bonita, so it's a more established area. So you do have to be a little more aggressive. So we're treating her at a 3-month interval, 3 to 4 months, but her palm is still alive. This is an interesting case study as well. This was January 2020. She's by the airport. Here in San Diego. Obviously the palm looks attacked, the meristem is missing, and it's even starting to flatten a little bit. You give them the whole spiel that the likelihood of survival is not very high. This is the only palm she has with a very beautiful pool and view out to the bay. So she wanted to try treating. This was 2 months later in March. You can see that it's starting to get some growth on both pictures there. You can see some kind of growth starting to come in. This was like 7 months later in August. It made a complete recovery. On the right there, I have some arrows and you can see damaged areas. The palm might look a little distorted for a while, but it's very promising that the palm started to regrow and she's very happy, and we're just keeping her about a 3 or 4 month interval right now, just because she's in a very established area for weevil. This was recently in May. I'd say the palm looks fantastic, and we're just going to continue with treatments preventatively and hopefully keep the weevil away. So just a comparison, in a little over a year, we were able to, we got in there in time and the palm was able to recover. This is the swap meet. I mentioned it, but this is in 2019. This one already had one dead. As I mentioned, if you have that toolbox approach and you're not set on one application, we pretty much ruled out any type of basil, any type of soil application here. And so we were really left with a spray. Seeing that it's a wide open parking lot, the issues of spraying were minimal. There's no ponds or pets or parks nearby, no homes. So we were, get a good application on these palms. And to date, we have not lost one palm. And here we've only been able to do a spray. So that's a very positive affirmation there that you don't need to get a soil, you don't need a systemic. If we just get some kind of spray into that part where the palms are being attacked, I think you can get some good results. This is one I referenced earlier, but same. We ended up going with using the HTI injection on this one because we could not spray, we could not do a bit. We didn't want to try the trunk injection, and we found a little bit of space, soil, and we were able to inject over near the wall and the other side of the pavers, and the palm's still alive. We've been treated, I think we've done 2 applications here. She's in PB and the palm looks great. This is an interesting one. So this homeowner, he's in the Mission Hills area, and the palm on the left is his palm. If you see that box to the bottom right, that's a bee box. He's in a canyon, so there's a lot of native habitat down there. The palm is rather large. I'd say it's 50 feet. It's on a slope. And so really our options here were pretty limited to none, where I told him, I don't know if we can help you. He found some cocoons and some adults. His neighbor behind him had a dead palm from palm weevil. And I, in a nice way, just said, sorry, I don't know if we can help you. I just didn't want to take the risk of the bees and run off towards the bees. It didn't look like it was going to be a good option. He didn't want to spend the extra money for the basil application. So in a sense, we kind of said, sorry, I don't know if we can help you. I did tell him, he's a really nice gentleman, tell him over the phone that that Mark in 2017 told me about over in Tunisia, they were doing these applications where they would cut all the head down to control the red palm weevil, I believe, and they would just soak the head with some kind of systemic. And that's that gentleman on the right. As you can see, he's got all the proper PPE for Tunisia. But that I told that story to Mr. Starr that that's how they get a treatment. They get up there and just treat, not knowing where that was going to end up. He called me about a month later. He's like, hey, I'm ready for you. A couple months later, and if you can see, he got his ladder, he got some PVC pipe, and he put it all the way to the top of the palm, and he wanted us to come in, plug in, and treat. Again, he hasn't moved his bee box, and that was the challenge. And so we kind of went back and forth, and after some talks, we figured, you know what, we probably can pull this off. So we showed him our attachments to our truck. He went out, got the proper plumbing, and he ran the pipe up there, and we plugged in to our equipment, and with very low pressure, we've been able to treat it. But as you can see, by March, the palm is already starting to show some signs of decline. If I go back a slide or two, that's how it was in October when he found some activity at the base. His neighbor's palm was dead. And by March, it's already starting to wilt. So treatment was kind of a Hail Mary. So we've done two applications, since then, 5 months apart. So we treated in March, and then this was again in March. And then we just treated again in August. As you can see, that seemed to do the trick. He wants to keep it about 5-6 months, knowing that he's in a very, very saturated area, but that seems to be a good way to go there. But again, it's as long as we get some kind of application and you have different options and don't be set on one specific form of treatment. There's a lot of different tools out there, and the more you add to your toolbox as far as treatments and products, the better chance you have of saving the palm. But I've had really good success with any type of treatment. I think as long as you can get some kind of systemic on there, I think you got a really good chance to save your palm. As Mark mentioned, and I'm a big proponent that there's a lot of good research out there. They're constantly updating it. So I highly recommend to go to the UC websites. A lot of good info out there for you. A lot of people have been involved with us getting to this point as far as our knowledge of how to attack this, and I'm very thankful to have Mark on my team, and along with the Rainbow guys, and Tracy Ellis, who retired, was a big help, and the PTCA, my colleagues there, to help me with notifying me of the palm. But yeah, if there's any questions, I'd love to see if I can help.
Thank you, Ricardo. This is an excellent presentation and a lot of good information for landscape managers and homeowners. If you can please hang around and answer some of the questions in the Q&A, we'd appreciate that. And there may be some more questions, but we'll directly jump into our third speaker. Our third speaker today is Muhammad Al-Zubaydi. He is with California Department of Food and Agriculture, and going to share with us some of the information on trapping and control of South American palm weevil. With that, I'll pass it over to Mohammed.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about two palm weevils. I'm going to talk about the red palm weevil, which has become more like history. You know, people seem to have forgotten about it almost, which was declared eradicated back in 2015. And I'm going to also talk about the South American palm weevil, which is the one that we are more concerned about now because it's the hot issue at the moment. So I'll start with a chronology, basically talking about how we started and where we started. And I'm going to be talking about the response we had against these two weevils, how they were kind of similar weevils in a way, but different responses. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the spread of the South American palm weevil and a little bit on future outlook. So really, the story of the palm weevils infestation in California started in August of 2010. In the beginning of August, an arborist removed a Canary Island palm tree. Let me see if I could actually show you exactly on Google Earth where that is. Yeah, the residence was here on Hillcrest, and it was about a quarter of a mile from the ocean. So let me see. Go back to my. Can I do this one?
The PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Go
Okay.
Oh, no. Go back to it.
Okay. So basically, the arborist removed the palm tree from this residence, and in the beginning of August of 2010, and he found adults and larvae in the tree that he removed. And he held on to them for a while before showing them to a friend of his who was more into bugs, so to speak. And the friend suggested that the samples be submitted to the Orange County entomologist at the time. And they were, initially identified as the palmetto weevil, which would have been a curated pest. The samples were submitted to the Sacramento lab. And after some kind of deliberation, it was decided that it was actually the red palm weevil, the more dreaded pest. And that was kind of done towards the end of September. It was actually confirmed by the USDA on September 24th of 2010. So when that happened, we knew we had a problem on our hand. We didn't have a lure for it. We didn't have traps for it at the time. We really had no experience with the pest like that. So while we were researching where to get the lures from, where to get the traps from, we decided to do a visual survey, which actually started only 3 days after the confirmation of the pest. So on the 9/27, visual survey started, and I'm going to be talking about it a little bit more elaboration later on. And basically, 2 weeks from the determination, we started the delimitation process. We had our traps, we had our lures, and we started placing the traps around the find to see if there are any more. And I'm going to talk about that later as well. So the visual survey on the 13th of October, we are able to find pieces of an adult at the original site, which would have been this one. So that was the first confirmation. And then on October 20 and 21st, we found empty cocoons in another site that was maybe 100 yards away. That's what they say. It says L. And on the 26th, the homeowner at that residence, he had a Canary Island palm that it lost. It's a crown, so he scheduled it for removal. And so we had, Dr. Hadl, University Extension, the California University Extension, and USDA, the County of Orange, and CDFA officials present at the removal of the palm tree. And Dr. Hadl actually recovered a live weevil from the palm tree. So there is no question here that, there is something going on here in the presence of officials from USDA, CDFA, the county, and the University of California. On November the 3rd, an arborist gave us some anecdotal information of some finds that they had in the past. And let me see if I could show that on Google Earth. So, here are the squares here. The squares are actually the sites where in the past we had anecdotal information of palm trees removed from these areas. So here is the original find. Here is the find I was talking about where Dr. Hadl actually removed a live or recovered a live weevil. And here are the historical finds. Well, we're still talking about a very, very small area. So in October, in November, towards the end of November, we had an assessment team that visited the site and gave us some hints and advice on what to do, how to trap for it, and the rest of it. And on December 1st, we found empty cocoons on. I skipped one site. On the 20th of November, a resident at this area, he reported, parts of a weevil that we collected. And this is the furthest we actually found some evidence of infestation. This area from the original to here is a little under a mile, maybe about 3/4 of a mile. So we're still talking about a very, very small area. And in December, we found parts of adults and some cocoons in a palm tree on Pacific Coast Highway in this area. Now, in 2011, the Science Advisory Panel, or if you like to call them the Technical Working Group, they met in the beginning of January, and they gave us further advice on how to respond to this. And in February, we found cocoons beneath a palm tree in, let me show you the area. Let me show you the area. And that would have been slide number 5, which is right here. It's basically between the original find and site number 2. It's still, you're talking about a very, very tight area. And that is the last evidence of an infestation of red palm weevil in Laguna Beach before we actually trapped a weevil in 2012, which I'm going to go to later on. So anyway, while we were responding to the red palm weevil in Laguna Beach, the story came about another weevil, and that was in Tijuana. So there was a concern that it might have crossed the border into San Diego County. So in February of 2000, on February the 14th of 2011, we started the trapping for South American palm weevil, this time in southern San Diego County along the border. We placed 5 traps per square mile on a band of 2 square miles from the beach to yes, this area, Ducati. And in May of that year, we had our first find of South American Palm Weevil in San Diego County. And it was very, very close to the border, and I will come to that later on. So when we found the South American Palm Weevil in San Diego County, the question was, could it have entered Imperial County as well? So in July of that year, we started trapping in Imperial County, and in the following month, we had our first find in Calexico. And again, I'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail later on. That brings us to the end of 2011. So 2012, it started with the first and only trapped red palm weevil in Laguna Beach, and that was on January the 18th of 2012. And in May of that year, we found another South American palm weevil in Calexico, and I'm going to talk about that later as well. And in the year of 2012, we run an experiment, University of California, Riverside. You know, they run an experiment in Laguna Beach to test further the possibility of, because the question is, you know, we only found one weevil, could we have missed a bunch? So Dr. Huddle, he worked on some enhanced method of trapping for this weevil, and we experimented with that in June of 2012, and again in October of that year, and we run both experiments for around 6 weeks, and I'm going to talk about that later as well. Okay, 2013 was really of little consequence. You know, the fourth find in along Pacific Coast Highway, you know, the tree was removed, but that was not because of the weevil, because of, you know, the owner wanted to remove that, and there was no evidence of infestation in that tree. And incidentally, that tree was actually treated earlier, and I'm going to talk about that as well later on. Nothing of consequence in 2014, and in 2015 we declared the red palm weevil eradicated after 3 years of no find from the original trapping of the weevil. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit of more details about the steps that we actually took. The visual survey that I talked about was covering 1.5 mile radius from the find site. So here is the find site. This is 1.5 mile. And as you can see, the Pacific Ocean and the wilderness around Laguna Beach they were our biggest allies, because we would have had to have covered such a huge area doing a visual survey. But it was still pretty big. You know, we looked at close to 2,000 properties, and we inspected close to 14,000 palms. And there were the 5 finds that I covered earlier. So the surveyors, what the surveyors were looking for, they were looking for tilting or missing the crowns, or dead or dying fronds. And Ricardo and Mark, they covered that, you know, very, very well before. So I'm not going to elaborate on this. And there were some other symptoms like the nudging on the fronts, the exit holes. But the things that we really relied on most to indicate that there was something going on was finding pupal cases, or finding whole or partial weevil bodies, because these tells you that something must have gone on. You know, the other symptoms like damage to the fronds, could have been caused by some other causes like, rodents or trimming, chain saws and things like that. Delimitation trapping started really a week after the visual survey start and 2 weeks after the confirmation of the weevil. And so we covered 1.5 mile radius around the find, and we had an array of traps at densities of 50 traps per square mile in the very core square mile where the find was. And the first band of 8 square miles around the core square miles are treated with 25 traps per square mile, and the following band with 25 traps per square mile as well. We would have had to have placed 650 traps, but thanks to the ocean and the wilderness, we only placed 150. And what we used in the traps, we used aggregation pheromone with some synergist, and we used also food lure in the form of apples, put in water, which allows them to ferment. And we used 50/50 antifreeze to collect the specimens. So here is, where the traps were during the delimitation. I'll go to Google Earth again here and see if I could actually show you a little bit more realistic picture. So here we are, where the cluster of reds here, that's where the core is, that's where the original find was. And as you can see, the distribution of the traps is lopsided, i.e. more on the eastern part or southern part, if you like, very little on the north because hardly anything going on because I've got so much wilderness there. In fact, we went beyond the 2.5 mile radius where we could. We covered close to 3 miles, where we could. So that is what we. That's where the traps are, and the traps were serviced weekly, and the lures were replaced every 90 days. And here is what. Okay, here is the second. We had a second visual survey when we found our only weevil in January of 2012. It was felt that we needed to do another visual survey. This time it was a little bit more focused. Instead of 1.5 miles, we went only for 1 kilometer radius around the find. And we kind of covered 782 properties, 171 Canary Island date palm, 71 true date palm, and a total of 5,322 palm trees were inspected again. We didn't find anything new from this survey. And so I mentioned the experiment that Dr. Hodel and Dr. Kabashima worked on with also Christina Hodel and Nick Nissen, myself, we were helping as well. Let me see if I could get, oh, there it is. All right. Well, let me talk to this. Okay. What Mark was trying to say, he was trying to talk about this enhanced trapping that he ran, to see if actually there is something there that we could have missed. So basically, these are the 4 triangles rather, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the areas where we put the traps that you could see, but you couldn't hear the sound about. So here is the original find, and here are, so we pretty much place it right where the action is. And we run the experiment twice, as I said, in June and in October of 2012 for about 6 weeks, and with no new finds. So that was really, I'm sorry about the sound part. Let's see, I guess. Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, one other thing we did now, because the damage to these weevils is typically at the top part of the tree. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to see any symptoms, let alone seeing any weevils. So, we deployed some, buckets, as you can see, that where somebody could go up in the tree and in the crown, and they could cut some of fronds. And then the reason for the fronds is to have some observation observation window where we could actually have a closer look to what is actually going on, going there. Treatment-wise, again, I think Ricardo did a very, very good job explaining the options for treatment, so I'm not going to elaborate here. But we, in collaboration with the industry, and treatment was carried out at least at 2 sites. And the pesticide we actually used was the systemic pesticide, the dianofuran and imidacloprid, which could be applied directly on the tree, injected in the soil, or injected in the tree itself. We also use contact pesticides in the form of bifenthrin. Okay, so the eradication of the red palm weevil in Laguna Beach, that happened, was declared in 2015, and it's attributed to the fact that the infestation was pretty small, very small and isolated. Of course, there was very, very strong public and industry support, and there was quite a bit of coordination and collaboration with involvement from state, federal, county, and the university. And of course, some people argue that the climate might have been on our side when we're dealing with this pest. Now we come to the South American palm weevil. Now, the South American palm weevil, it can be just as destructive as the red palm weevil. Some might argue that it could be even more destructive because it could not only kill the host directly by feeding on it, but it's also a vector of the red ring nematode, which is, in some people's opinion, it's kind of a death sentence for a palm tree once it is infested with this pest. So, trapping for the South American palm weevil in San Diego County, as I mentioned in the chronology, started in February of 2011, and we had our first find in May of that year. Here's where the first find was, which is this distance from here to here is only 1.6 miles. So you could tell how very close to the border we were, and it is probably a flyover from the Tijuana area. It's definitely connected to what was going on there. And as I mentioned earlier, we had a band of 2 miles, over a distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 miles, 9 by 2, some 18 miles a square mile, where we had 5 traps per square mile. So when we had our first find, we were going to replicate what we did in Laguna Beach, i.e. we would do the visual survey, and we would do the delimitation that we did in Laguna Beach. And indeed, we started the visual survey, and we started the delimitation, as you can see from the figures here. In fact, in our delimitation in San Diego, we placed almost twice as many traps, 290 as opposed to 150 in Laguna Beach. Before we were told that, we're not going to be doing that, partly because the weevil is actually constantly established in Tijuana, and with Mexico not doing enough about it, people were doubting the wisdom of trying to take it on or try to eradicate it. So at the same time, we were expanding our survey for the South American Palm Weevil. We were going.
Mohammed, can I cut in for a second? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. But I just for people who may need to leave, because we're about at the end of the session, but you can continue. I just wanted to direct their attention to the chat. One of the conditions to get the CEUs are to pass a final test. And Peter has put the link to that test in the chat. So if you do need to leave, the link is there. So I just want to let people know that they can click on that link. And if you don't pass it the first time with 70% or higher, there's an option to take it again. So I just wanted to mention that. And then also when you get off of Zoom, there should be a feedback survey that pops up. So if you could answer that as well, that would be very helpful for us. Okay, go ahead. You can continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, thank you very much. So anyway, we were at the same time running a statewide survey for the South American Palm Weevil to see if there has been a spread. And here are the figures of what we've actually done from the year when we found the red palm weevil in Laguna Beach and the South American palm weevil to the present day. So in 2010-11, basically, the biggest story was the 150 delimitation traps that we had in Laguna Beach. And then, of course, we started placing in San Diego, and we placed 200 traps countywide. And we started placing in Imperial, as I said, in July of that year. Initially, we had 109 traps, mostly around Calexico and the Valley, but we expanded our trapping in Imperial County to reach 150 the following year. Now, in 2012 and 13, as you can see, we had almost 1,000 traps deployed statewide. And in March of 2013, that's when the USDA more or less gave its update and guidelines regarding what we are going to do and what we are not going to do. And I'm going to go into a summary of what their determination was at a later stage of this presentation. They basically kind of stopped supporting spending money on trapping for the South American Palm Weevil, and this is actually reflected in the number of traps deployed. From 2014, for example, went from nearly 1,000 to 390. In 2017, we did not trap for the South American Palm Weevil. Of course, in 2015, the red palm weevil was eradicated, so we didn't have to kind of worry about that. In 2018, we resumed our statewide survey or trapping at a much lower rate. But we still had we had 40 in San Diego, we had 50, and so forth. And I'm going to talk about that later on. Here is what actually made us kind of stop the survey for the South American Palm Weevil. as I said earlier, the USDA did some work in Tijuana, and they found that the weevil very heavily. There are very heavy infestation down there, and they basically, as I said earlier, they were convinced that without doing something on this part of the border, there is no point in doing much on our side. So here is their the summary of the recommendations. APHIS acknowledges that a continuous incursion of South American palm weevil into the U.S. from Mexico is occurring. This may lead to the establishment of this weevil in the United States. Then they talk about no further official action will be taken to contain this pest. Federal trapping programs and other survey efforts for South American palm weevil should be discontinued. If the situation with Mexico should change, APHIS will then reevaluate the situation. APHIS will provide outreach material to SPHD, SPRW, industry, and the public. APHIS will encourage businesses in the US that may move palm-related host material to develop monitoring and certification programs to establish pest-free areas or pest-free places of production to allow continued movement of products. Work with industry to develop best management practices to assist them further with issues surrounding the pest. Critical research questions remain and include the following: the efficiency of survey techniques, types and availability of pesticides that might help to move host material, early detection of nematodes in palms, and nematicide treatment of palms, early detection of weevils in palms, and the unknown potential of other weevil species to vector red ring nematode. Request NPAG to review the current status of this pest and its relationship to nematodes. If the status of this pest changes, the federal importation quarantine order as it relates to SAPW will need revision. The distribution of the red ring nematode, if found, should be monitored through appropriate methodology. So that's really what that was really it. That's how we ended up kind of reducing the trapping and ending up in the end of actually stopping it altogether. So I'm going to talk here a little bit about the trapping that we did in San Diego County and the counties that are contiguous with San Diego. Of course, I talk about San Diego here because it is the place where the biggest infestation of South American palm weevil is. And I'm again going to go to Google Earth. Maybe that might give you a little better perspective of what we actually did. Okay, so that's pretty much Southern California. San Diego County around here, this Imperial here, Riverside, and part of San Bernardino and Orange County is here. So, as I said earlier, I mean, San Diego had 200 traps. Imperial had 150. Riverside had 210. Orange County, at the height of the trapping was 200 traps because we are actually piggybacking our traps with the lures for both weevils, for the red palm weevil and for the South American palm weevil. Let me see. Okay. So here are the finds that we had in over the years. Now the orange is what we actually found in 2011. So in 2011, these are the maybe 9 or 10 sites in South San Diego County one find in Calexico. Here is the Mexican border. It is right next to the fence. And in 2011, we found another one in Calexico, very, very close, as you can see, to the previous find, even closer to the border. Now, in 2012, with 2012 we found this one in Imperial in San Diego. We found a few here. In 2013, we had these two finds in San Diego. What's interesting about them, it's the distance from the border. That the weevil is actually moving up north. Now, the reason we're not finding as many in that year, because we actually moved our traps more. We were more kind of biased to moving the traps further north because we knew that the south was infested. Now, 2014, then nothing happened through 2016, 2017, we did not trap. 2018, when we placed the trap back in San Diego County and we were not trapping in Imperial, here are the blue where we found the weevil. In terms of number, 19 and 18, they're comparable in terms of number of sites that had weevils trapped in. But what is really significant here is how far the weevil has actually moved in 2019. As we were removing the traps, we found one weevil in North San Marcos area. From this area to the border, we're talking about 44 miles. From this area to the furthest previous find, you're talking about maybe 22 miles. So there is quite a bit of movement. And as we removed the trap, we found another two. So we had a total of 3 in this area. And if I go to Google Earth, you might be able to see it perhaps better. Let's see what we can find here. Yeah, so here are the 3 finds that are very, very close to each other's. Pretty close to the freeway here. They're about 14 miles from the San Diego Riverside border. Now, in 2019, we stopped the trapping altogether. The CDFA stopped doing the trapping, but we made money available to the counties to enter into contract with us to do trapping for South American Palm Weevil. Only Imperial County picked the offer, and they deployed 150 traps, just like we did before. And they kind of built on what we started back in 2011. And so more or less they used pretty much very, very similar areas to deploy their traps, with some differences. They covered this area that we did not cover then. They know the traps originally were placed by CDFA employees, back in 2011. Of course, the county people, they know their county better. They deployed few more traps in this area, in the western part of Imperial County, closer to San Diego, and they actually trapped a weevil this year. I believe it was in May, and this is the red, the tier with the dot in it. As you can see, it's pretty close to the border still. But it is interesting that we actually had a find here. What is really interesting about them is how close they all are to the border. Okay. All right, and here is a model that USDA put together back in 2013 when they instructed us to stop the trapping activities. Here is there were kind of the assumption here that the weevil is going to be spreading from, South San Diego County, and with the assumption that the weevil is actually able to move on its own 19.3 kilometers. That is about maybe 12 miles a year. Well, they're fairly accurate in their assessment. I mean, in 2019, when we stopped trapping, the weevil was only 14 miles away from the border with Riverside, which happens to be the biggest palm production county in the nation. Now it is anybody's guess, where they are, because we don't have traps in San Diego County. We don't have traps in Riverside County. Yeah, we have traps in Imperial County, and and we have the consolation with whatever the word is, that at least we have traps there, and so far we haven't found anything further than, say, 10, 15 miles from the border, which is quite reassuring. Or is it really? I mean, where did these weevil come from? Where they fly over from Calexico? Did this one fly over, or was it carried over from San Diego County at one point? And indeed, although we have 150 traps there, is that enough to give us a reassurance that we had everything covered? I don't know. These are things I can't really speculate too much about. And I'm gonna stop here. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mohammed. Appreciate your presentation. That's really helpful information. With that, we'd like to conclude today's webinar. Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar.